Welcome back to the New World of Dominion as we start part 3 of day 27 from day 1 here on Dominion. As always, we hit the mailbag first to see what we have from the last time that we checked in. Art Bell and tonight's guest Andrew Basiago are ready in the wings when we're ready to rejoin them. Looks like 2 fireworks got shot off in the meantime. So 200 happy coins. Alrighty. So we still have to hit the dungeon and any other cleanup we have to do. In the meantime, let's get back to that interview with time travel and teleportation with Andrew Basiago from Midnight in the Desert, originally airing August 14th, 2015.
Hey, your conductor, Art Bell, will punch your ticket when you call 1-952-CALL-ART. That's 1-952-225-5278.
Andrew Basiago is my guest. Time traveler. No question about his story. Clearly, he's got it together. He believes it. And I'm starting to as well. It's an exceptional story. And people, of course, require exceptional proof for an exceptional story. But it's starting to sound pretty darn real to me. Andrew, I get these wormhole messages, and here is one. Apparently, all this began to gather intel, but at some point, you began to have vacations, essentially, in time, and in-person history lessons, I might add. This person says you had a great story about being given a second summer when you were a child because the program you were in, the hard work, took a whole summer away from you. Is that true?
Actually, they gave me extra summers. Let me explain how that was done. And this has been going on in the U.S. intelligence community, presumably now for 45 years. What happened in the summer of 1970, we were just going back and forth in real time, utilizing the Tesla teleporter at Curtis Wright, and then the one at Sandia to get back to the East Coast, back to the tarmac at Curtis Wright. Mm-hmm. But then in the summer of 71, the summer of 1973 accessed from the fall of 71, and then the summer of 72, we teleported from New Jersey to New Mexico, spent an entire summer there, and then they set the device so that when we teleported back to the East Coast, we arrived about an hour after we had originally left, even though we had spent the entire summer in New Mexico. So I'm about 9 months older biologically than my ostensible chronological age established historically, because I was slipstreamed for those 3 summers.
All right. I would like to ask about your trip back to Arizona. You said back to the dinosaurs. I mean, really, what was Arizona like then?
Well, I first did a jump via the chronovisor array that was at the General Manufacturing Company facility in Convent Station. 2 boys had come into the lab on their Stingray bicycles, two of my same age peers, right, on their Stingrays, so that they moved the chronovisor in to what was becoming the building that was undergoing historical renovation to become the Morristown Performing Arts Center. Beautiful theater there in historical Morristown, which also happened to be my place of birth. Beautiful colonial era city. Mm-hmm. My second chronovisor probe was from that chronovisor, and it was to a hot, red earth, humid Arizona environment. And what we later learned from Jack Pruitt, who was running us through the chronovisor probes, was in 100 million BC. And what I experienced is standing on the stage there in Morristown. We had a couple of warnings. Then the hologram was turned on, and I suddenly found myself standing on a red earth ridge, sort of the kind of soil that we find around Sedona, Arizona. Very beautiful rust red environment, right? And it was very hot, and I was walking up this hill. I started to just explore up the trail, and when I got to the crest line, I looked in this grassy valley over on my right, and there were 2 huge long-necked dinosaurs that were chomping on what looked like blades of grass that were, let's say, 20 feet tall. And then I just was thunderstruck at what I was looking at, and then everything around me began to fade like a chalk painting on a sidewalk in Paris. What was that movie? I think Mary Poppins depicted something like that. But everything, just all the color around me just started to fade. And then I experienced about 90 seconds of being enshrouded in this field of supercharged particles called scintillation. And then I would see the other children popping into view as black body emanations at first, an elbow, a kneecap, an arm, a leg, a head. And then all of the scintillation would stop, almost like a visual pattern when you have a migraine. Kind of the shimmer would go away. And there we were back in fall of 1970.
So in
New Jersey.
In linear time, you were probably there how long?
On that one, the scene faded, so I had to be in fewer than 15 minutes. If we were in country, so to speak, if we were in situ for more than 15 minutes, a density effect would occur, and they would have to insert a portal into the hologram. And that was indicated on our end by sort of a soccer goal-like contraption that we were trained to run towards and run through to be sucked up in the Vortal tunnel and brought back to contemporary New Jersey via a teleport that they had opened up at the back of a dinosaur tunnel in a defunct New Jersey amusement park. I think it may have been the amusement park Bertram's Island. But in any case, there was a fake dinosaur tunnel with a metal dinosaur. We would run towards in the time space place we were, what I like to call a time place. Okay, wherever we were, if we were in for more than 15 minutes under chronovision, we would run towards that apparatus, feel a kind of a tugging into a tunnel-like effect, continue to run into deeper and deeper sand, and then we would realize we were in the dinosaur tunnel at the abandoned New Jersey amusement park, and we would wait there for about 10 minutes, and a van would show up and drive us back to the time lab in Morristown.
When was your last time travel experience?
Well, that all depends on whether we were time traveling when we were taking the jump room to Mars or whatever planetary environment they were sending us in the jump room program. It's disputed as to whether it was the actual Mars or not.
Okay, well, I'm still willing to count that. So, what year?
That would have been 1984, and then I took part in one technical exercise in spring of '89 during the second half of my first year of law school in Portland, where I was summoned by Courtney Hunt of the CIA to travel to Albuquerque, from Portland to Albuquerque, and then drive to Socorro, New Mexico, where I sat in a huge electromagnet array inside of a Quonset hut over near the high explosives testing center in Socorro, because they were concerned that I would become destabilized in my time-space location. So he said, I know you're in law school, Andrew, but if you want to not go into the drink, you're going to have to do as I say. So there was some concern that I was in trouble at that point.
All right, what is it that finally caused you to come forward and tell this amazing story? I mean, what could possibly have motivated you to do this?
It's really the significance of the story itself and the moral duty that obtains. Basically, I was kind of impeded professionally in my mid to late 30s, and I had some time to think about what I'd experienced in childhood. I never forgot and never had the memories of Pegasus repressed. 10 years later, I would have my Mars visitation memories suppressed very effectively electronically, but I resisted the adverse treatment of myself that was subjected to make me forget my time travel experiences. And I mentioned them to my siblings off and on, to friends at school, but I never got anywhere when I tried to explain what I had been part of. I had been part of the inception of time travel in this civilization. And I had worked with some of the Manhattan Project physicists,
right.
Agnew, Teller, individuals like Sterling Colgate, who, if I'm not mistaken, discovered quasars. Okay, these were top people in quantum physics, and brilliant engineers like my father, like Dr. Beckwith, brilliant facilitators like Jack Pruitt.
Well, I'm very tempted to say, how could this possibly have been kept secret? But then again, the Manhattan Project was successfully kept secret, wasn't it?
It was 64,000 employees. It was kept secret during the war years.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So Project Pegasus was much smaller. It was kept intentionally small. I was in that initial meeting between my father and Agnew when my dad presented the prospectus for the program itself, involving civilians in the teleportation experiments and training. And Agnew instructed my father to not even keep restaurant receipts when project personnel would be wined and dined in Albuquerque and Los Alamos because he didn't want a paper trail. So they had a small staff and they kept the minutia of the project absolutely secret. But in terms of my own motivation, in terms of coming forward, I started thinking about what happened to me around 2000. So I was consuming all of your time travel shows. I took a hard look at the John Teeter information and found that I'm pretty sure it's a hoax. But I was also processing my own post-traumatic stress and my own disbelief about what I was remembering. And I spent years calling people, putting in keyword searches in Google when I could link, let's say, a set of keywords like Agnew, Director, Lannel, 1970, or Colgate, New Mexico Tech, Plasma Confinement, 1970.
Let me ask this. There were many people that you've named that were involved in all of this. Have you gone to any of them and said, look, help me blow this open, please. The world needs to know.
When I first called Dr. Agnew in 2000, he said, you're mixed up. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, this is a direct quote. He said, the teleportation project wasn't at Lannel. It was at another major lab in New Mexico.
Oh.
Well, of course, the return teleport was at Sandia. I interviewed people like Joseph Coniston, who was one of my father's colleagues at the Ralph M. Parsons Company of Pasadena, California, which was really the defense contractor responsible for giving the United States government time travel. I spoke to him for a half hour on the phone and described everything I was remembering. He denied all of it and even denied ever being in New Mexico. And then he said, Andy, what are you going to do with this information about the teleporters, the chronovisors, being in this, black project?
Right.
And I said, Mr. Coniston, whose name I clearly remembered from my dad's talking about him and meeting him on the project, I said, I'm going to write a book, tell it all, and try to get it made into a major motion picture. And this is a direct quote from a career engineer at the Ralph M. Parsons Company, who I'm alleging was involved in the time travel.
Now, can you understand that people listening to this right now might also consider that as a motivation for you to be telling, in quotes, a story, book, motion picture?
This is what hold on. This is what I've held off on completing my book and seeking selling my movie rights or producing my story for 15 years. I think I've earned my props in terms of not privateering. But imagine... Oh,
you've earned your props tonight, right here. You've earned your props. Don't worry about that. This story is told in a way that is very, very believable. I'm just saying, people might look at it that way, Andrew, that you can write a book, perhaps have a movie, and they'll look at that as motivation.
That's the case whether you have a true story or a fanciful one. But let me complete the story about Coniston, because it'll give you a sense of what my investigation was like.
Sure.
He listened and denied everything for a half hour on the phone. I reached him when he was 90 years old in retirement in Beverly Hills. And this is somebody who spent his career at Parsons, which I might inform your listeners, built an entire city for the government of Saudi Arabia called Yanbu, designed and built the MX missile system for the Department of Defense. We're talking about real heavyweights in engineering. This is what Coniston said to me. I said, and tell everything about the teleporters and chronovisors. He said, a book, this is a direct quote, a book, a movie, nobody on the outside knows about that stuff. Okay, that's from the horse's mouth from Parsons, one of my dad's career colleagues at the Ralph M. Parsons Company. So next time your Southern California listeners drive past Parsons, look over and wave, because that's the puzzle palace where the U.S. time-space capability emerged. It emerged as a result of Parsons doing a brilliant job coordinating this intelligence funnel that would produce a time travel capability. Ralph M. Parsons was so proud of his work that in 1972, he purchased what was then the world's largest private yacht from Adnan Khashoggi, the Iranian arms merchant. And what did he name it? He named it Pegasus 2. And that was on the Parsons website.
Really?
When I back in the early 20s when I was beginning my investigation. And after that, it was nothing but the Earth giving up its time travel secrets. On my second major fact-finding trip to New Mexico in 2004, I even went into the special collections at New Mexico Tech, pulled the Dr. Sterling Colgate file, and found a newspaper clipping from 1972 that announced that Dr. Colgate was going to be giving a public lecture on what? On what I had already been stating he used to send me to Gettysburg in 1863.
Okay.
Plasma confinement.
Right. I've got a question. Is it possible to bring physical items back?
Yes, if you're the person carrying the item, or the person carrying the thing jumps through the portal with you, if you're in for more than 15 minutes via chronovision, that's one way. We can't do it with teleportation because you would get stranded going there and being in the past. Mm-hmm. But we could bring George Washington or somebody back, or let's say, who was the man who got trapped in the whale in the Bible?
Noah?
Job?
Job.
Was it Noah? Job? Anyway.
No, that would be Jonah, you guys. Granted, I'm not a big biblical scholar, but yeah, that's Jonah. Okay, back to our bill.
Wait, if we could open up a time-space portal, if we were to try to do that, we could do it by opening up a time-space portal via chronovision, inserting a portal, and bringing the person through with us. In fact, that happened several times accidentally when we were jumping back from the past. And we had to send the person back. We had to chronovize them back to their time-space.
Probably had to have them see a psychiatrist as well.
Yeah.
So, do you have any idea of what's happened since the time you exited the program, however that happened, and now? Is it still going strong?
I think it is. Let me say what I know.
Okay.
I know that in 1972, we were all told that we were going to be separated from the project as a pro forma matter. The project would never communicate with us again, and if anybody asked them whether the project existed or we were part of it, they would deny everything. That's what we were told. We were then shoved off deck like surplus helicopters off of an aircraft carrier and never communicated with again, except for my one-off discussions with my father, Courtney Hunt of the CIA, and then, bless his heart, Jack Pruitt, who met with me shortly for a brief briefing in 2003 in Santa Fe with his late son, Glenn Pruitt, one of my same-age peers who actually succumbed to some of the physical side effects of the early days of teleportation in the defense technical community. So I was essentially separated from Project Pegasus in 72. Based on everything that was discussed in my presence, however, and I was often the fly on most of the walls, because when I was in New Mexico, for example, during those 3 extra summers, I was very frequently with my father when he was dining with his colleagues on the project, people like Rumsfeld. So I heard a lot about the future, about things that would emerge in the future, like 9/11, like the internet, like an epidemic disease called AIDS, like ubiquitous cell phone usage, like the identity of future presidents, the Bushes, Bill Clinton, all 3 of whom I had lunch with when I was a kid on the project after they were told they were going to be president. So if I synthesize everything I remember overhearing, I think we're kind of at this place now in what evolved. I think the teleports were established secretly at U.S. military bases to do the first purpose for which they were using children, namely shuttle our executive branch officials around the world in a time-urgent way. That is to say that I believe that probably every president since Carter has probably been teleporting, and that the Air Force One footage, at least some of the time, has been staged.
Are you in danger for telling the story?
Yes, I met with a representative of the Executive Office of the President as my investigation was evolving in the early 2000s. I met with a man, he was not identified by name, but by his job classification. I met him at the abandoned parking lot of the Wolf Creek Pass Ski Lodge, north of Pagosa Springs, Colorado, right near the Continental Divide. It was June of 2003. There was no snow on the ground, hence no skiers, so we had a private outdoor place to talk that couldn't have been recorded. And he told me the following. He said, Andrew, we don't know why you abandoned your career when you were potentially emerging as a prominent environmental lawyer. We're kind of mystified as to why you're obsessed now with your childhood time travel experiences, but we want you to know the following. That Project Pegasus existed, that you were part of it, that you're not losing your mind, you were legitimately part of it, it was a bona fide project, and that it involved the development of different time travel technologies. But we also want you to know, in terms of what's relevant today and for the future, that the Executive Office of the President wants you to know that if you continue to investigate, write about or talk about the technologies, we cannot guarantee your survival. So, Art, I don't know whether that was a Rumsfeld scripted. Of course, Secretary Rumsfeld was then SecDef. He was Secretary of Defense at that time. He's been the longest serving Secretary of Defense under Gerald Ford and George W. Bush. I don't know whether that was a Rumsfeld scripted Strange-Lovian warning to me.
Sounded like a warning to me. All right, hold tight.
I think it was a warning.
Okay, hold on. Warning. All right, hold tight.
All right, again, we'll be back as soon as they're back from the audio bumper. Those bubbles are basically them talking about their battles in the arena. Grand Arena for the Guild War. Trying to keep their number one spot in this server. Beautiful, beautiful, folks. One more rosary bubble. And they're back.
Please coordinate your phalanges and call 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL ART.
Well, I'm not sure what you can say about this so far, except that it is a well-told story by a very articulate man who absolutely believes what he's saying, and it sure sounds real. So, Andrew, welcome back. You mentioned something about a quantum bomb.
Shell. Yes.
Shell, yeah.
It truly is, Art, so I hope you're sitting down.
I am.
Okay. Let me set it up properly so you can put it in proper historical perspective and personal perspective, because it's going to transform your view of the quantum hologram and your own place in it.
Okay.
And I offer it as a gift, certainly not as a criticism, but I offer it as a profound gift for your decades of great reporting in general, and specifically your coverage of the time travel subject, which I think is going to kind of define the 21st century. I mean, we're going to be teleporting in just a few years when this technology is declassified. I'm talking about the Tesla teleportation technology.
How do you expect that to occur, by the way?
Under proper presidential leadership, if I or somebody else has to bring it, I think it's going to require a president committed to doing it, to declassifying life-advantaging technologies rather than keeping them secret and pent up in the war machine, the military-industrial complex that President Eisenhower warned us about in his January 61 farewell address.
So you think it will take a president who decides the time is now?
Yes, and that's why I'm seeking the presidency in 2016 as an independent candidate. But it doesn't have to be me. It could be somebody else. It could be Jim Webb. It could be Jeb Bush. It could be Hillary Clinton. But we have to do it. And you know why? Because if we implement Tesla teleportation, we will remove from the atmosphere 60% of the greenhouse gases that we create that we can affect.
Of those possible presidents you just mentioned, Andrew, somebody who has done a lot of time travel into the reasonable future should know who's going to be president.
Well, I did know some of the past ones, and I believe my colleague Alfred Lambermont Weber can confirm that I described the Obama presidency before it happened in 2008.
Okay.
I don't know all of them because I was just introduced to several of them. And for example, I had lunch with Bill Clinton when he was still in law school, or even earlier. I can't really date it. It was 69, 70, 71 in New Mexico, shortly after he had been briefed on his future presidency. But I don't know about the Hillary Clinton candidacy relative to...
Nobody knows about that now.
Yeah.
All right, so the quantum bomb shall proceed.
Okay. I have to set it up properly, and that is that in the fall of 1971, my father was responsible for getting me through the teleporter at Sandia by 9 p.m. one night, which was some kind of technical witching hour that he had to do. But he was in the hallway regaling a young physicist, kind of a young Stanton Friedman, about the fact that we were teleporting. And this young physicist just couldn't believe it. He was asking about any medical side effects, how we were doing it, and so forth. So when I finally was almost picked up and carried by one of the ladies from DARPA, and I ran through the device at Sandia that night, I looked over at the standard clock on the wall, and it was 9:02 p.m. What ended up happening as a result of that, I don't know why, it was some kind of technical effect, is I began slipping. So, for example, when we moved to Southern California in '72, and I would be standing at my locker in junior high school in Chatsworth, California, I'd be putting my books in my book bag, and then suddenly all of the noise of the horseplay of the kids around me would suddenly stop, and the sound of them would actually be ringing in my ears. They would suddenly disappear, and I would get kind of like this Kundalini sensation. And I would walk to my next class, and I would get a tardy for being a couple minutes late. So in the beginning of the summer of '80, my dad got right in front of me in our front yard in Chatsworth, and he explained how he was going to send me over to a painting contractor near the Van Nuys, California airport, where there was a teleporter in their shop. And the guys there would push me through the machine. I would pop out behind one of the buildings in Los Alamos. They would run me through a couple short hallways there, back into another Tesla teleporter, and I would teleport the short distance back to Van Nuys, popping into view in front of the building, and just walk down to my brother's Chevy Malibu, which I was supposed to keep the keys to his car in the ignition, because of course you can't take magnetic metal through the Tesla teleporters. And my dad explained how this was an attempt to shave off the extra 2 minutes by which I was repeatedly slipping in life. For all I know, that showed up at on the security cameras at the Northridge Fashion Center. I don't know how they detected I was slipping. I must have been seen disappearing from view. So this was going to be a means to shave off that extra 2 minutes. Now, to this day, I don't know whether they succeeded at doing that and returned me to my original timeline from birth, or they basically placed me on a third timeline, with the time between the slippage in fall of '71 and summer of '80 being kind of a quantum interregnum during which I was on a second timeline, okay? But my point here is I'm not on the same timeline I was up until that mishap in fall of '71. But something happened to me several weeks before that event in '71 that should be of great personal interest to you. Okay. And I offer it now, having spent 15 years waiting to tell you. And here it is. On November 5th of 1971, we participated in an advanced chronovisor probe from ITT Defense Communications in Nutley, New Jersey. I checked the date because it was the first Friday in November of '71, and I remembered how they were constantly asking whether we were psychologically prepared. And this was no ordinary chronovisor array. This light was so bright that we were stanchioned to the floor of the stage. There was a metal stanchion with a non-metallic belt that reached out, and we were actually stanchioned to the floor. Okay?
Yes.
When the light was turned on, we disappeared. Okay? We weren't seen walking out of view in the time-space hologram that was propagated. We disappeared from view. Now, and that was, by the way, that was the probe during which we were sent to the U.S. Supreme Court building in the year 2013, and I at least found, and during my debriefing with a lieutenant commander from the Navy down the hall, reported that the Supreme Court building was under about 100 feet of brackish water. Mm-hmm. But we didn't experience that in 2013. We came, however, within 5 to 6 days, that is 1 degree of rotation of the Earth, of being struck on Earth by a solar flare that would have melted the polar ice caps and resulted in that event that we saw during that time probe. These time probes, after all, especially during chronovision, sometimes accessed alternate timelines where, at least in that case, that hellacious disaster occurred, but which thankfully we were spared. Okay. Now, before each technical activity, there would be an acclimation. We would be taken to the project location, and the technology would be explained to us to a group of about 4 or 5 children. So prior to that November 5th, '71 time probe from ITT Defense Communications in Nutley, we went out to that location. When we arrived in the room where the advanced chronovisor was, there was a sole technician who was working with one of the holograms, trying to keep it stabilized so it wouldn't go on the blink like an old TV picture. And he was very, very frustrated. It was clear from my surmise now that maybe he was there for hours trying to keep that hologram up. You can't send people in time-space via chronovision when your hologram keeps collapsing.
Right.
Okay. We run in as a group of noisy fifth graders by fall of 71, and the young technician, about 25 years of age, bearing a striking resemblance to you as a young man, Art, said, "Would you tell these children to shut the blank up?" Now, Art,
all right.
hold on, Art, it gets better. Our facilitator was a beautiful young brunette named Elaine Gallagher. She was a stunning young woman, kind of Diana Rigg at 21. Okay, she was a beautiful woman, and she said, and very kind, and she said to the technician, "You know, we're not supposed to use profanity around the children. That's definitely verboten. Give me your name. I want to put you up on report." And the technician, this is my, bear with me, this was my initial timeline. I hadn't been shifted yet as a result of the mishap at Sandia. The young technician said, "Arthur William Bell III, but to a young lady as pretty as you can just put me up on report as Art." What I'm saying, Art, is we are making broadcasting history tonight because this is the first interview in which a U.S. chrononaut as a guest, is being interviewed by a radio host who the chrononaut met on an alternate timeline when he was time traveling for the U.S. government.
All right.
I encountered you when I was in Project Pegasus, and I've been waiting 15 years to tell you.
Well, I'll tell the audience, and I don't think I've really told anybody that I know of, except some close friends a long time ago. I worked for ITT in Nutley, New Jersey. I was a technician, and I was checking waveguide for a government project, rather secret project, actually. So that's the truth. I don't exactly remember what you just said about the children and about my expletive, but I indeed worked for ITT in Nutley, New Jersey. So, oh my God, okay, that's a bomb. That's a bombshell.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to break it here because, how the hell could he know that? I did. I worked for ITT Nutley. That can be verified.
All right, again, we'll be muted until the music comes back. But Art, really? Jeez. Alrighty, Mr. Bell. Alrighty, with 68, while we're waiting for the music, I think we'd have some pluses, wouldn't we? Oh, we haven't leveled up yet, that's why. Pluses can't go until we level up. And now back to Art Bell.
This is Midnight in the Desert with Art Bell. Please call the show at 1-952-225-5278. That's 1-952-CALL ART.
Well, okay. I let this play because I really needed time to think a little bit about this. He's right about the timeline. I don't know how much I can tell you about this because it was a government project. But I was working for ITT in Nutley, New Jersey. At the time I lived in Newark, New Jersey with my dad, and commuted by bus to Nutley. I was checking waveguide for SWR, for those of you who know what that means, and working in bands that were, you know, I don't want to talk a lot about this because I don't know. I do know a lot of it was classified, and I don't know how much I can actually talk about. But yes, he dropped a quantum bombshell on me. There's no question about that, and I'm giving it as much thought as I can, trying to decide how he knows this. Andrew, you're back on the air.
Yeah. I do apologize if it was personally shattering. But I think it's a perfect object lesson actually in timelines. The reason that I have this memory is because it happened to me, but we know it happened on the original timeline that I was on. Now, one decision could have resulted in you working on chronovision rather than waveguide propagation in that context at that time as yourself. And that decision would have been the decision by the Pope of Rome, by the Vatican, to release the Ernetti and Gemelli's chronovision to the United States government. Chronovision emerged in the early 1940s. in the work of two Vatican musicologists named Pellegrino Ernetti and Agostino Gemelli. They were distinguished Catholic prelates doing investigations at the Catholic University of Milan into the harmonic patterns in Gregorian chants. And when they made a change on a specialized microphone, something that Gemelli's father had said to him in childhood came through the device. And they realized, well, wait a minute. There's some connection obviously here to Agostino, but we've just created a portal of sound between the present and his childhood. We've just accidentally discovered a time travel device. Okay, so one decision could have governed whether you ended up working on chronovision or waveguide propagation at ITT Defense Communications at that time. But the reason that I know that you worked there is simply I met you there, and because of the way you responded to her statement that she was going to put you up on report, you kind of honorably defended your whole name, and then you kind of flirted with her and said, well,
I did a lot of that back then.
Yeah, it kind of fits. I think
Listen, Andy, this is where we stop, and I'm going to open phone lines.
Okay.
You willing to face the public?
Oh, absolutely. But I had to share that with you, and I think, again...
Oh, thanks for blowing my mind.
I know it would blow your mind, but we think of timelines as concrete highways, but they're not. They're holographic, so they're semi-overlapping.
I will only say this. What we were working on at the time at ITT was for NATO, and I'm going to stop right there. And, oh my God. So I'm going to open the phone lines. Here it is, folks. Our public number is area code 952. 952-225-5278. Area code 952-225-5278. If you want to call us on Skype, you can do it. We in North America, Canada, it's MITD51. MITD51. Outside of North America, it's MITD55. MITD55. All of that said, Andrew, here it comes. Let's try Matthew, I believe, on Skype. Hello.
Yes, sir. This is Matthew, the Sunday school teacher.
Okay.
And it was not Noah or Job that was in the whale. It was Jonah.
Jonah, yes.
Jonah.
Yeah, I got that.
Yes.
And if I just might say, you had a caller on the other night saying that 666 was part of Babylonian astronomy from the book of Daniel. That is incorrect.
Okay,
It's from the book of Revelation.
Thank you for that. Now, if you would concentrate, we don't have a lot of time, so if you have a question for Andy.
Yes, I wonder how he brings up his challenges against the Pope of Rome. This is a wicked and idolatrous doctrine. I want to just say, rest in peace to J.C. Webster III. Thank you very much, Art. I take my answer off the air.
Rest in peace, J.C.
Well, I wasn't criticizing the Pope or the Vatican. I was just simply stating the historical fact that I learned from my father that one of the, like his own work repeating Tesla's teleportation experiments at the Edison labs in the late 50s and early 60s, another major technical input into Project Pegasus was Vatican technology. The Catholic University of Milan is a Vatican institution, and hence the Vatican had control over the chronovision technology that Ernetti and Gemelli developed beginning in the 40s.
Okay, there was something very familiar about that voice that I just heard, and I just want to state, if that was JC's son, you have my condolences. Hello there, on Skype, you're on the air with Andy.
Hi, Art. This is Celestial from Montana.
Okay, Montana.
Roswell, I want to ask your guest, please tell us about your connection to Obama, because I know you have a connection with our president.
Okay.
Yes, and in fact, that's a connection that the president has affirmed factually through an intermediary to my team consisting of William Stillings and Bernard Mendez. Barack Obama, utilizing the name Barry Soetoro, was a participant in the Mars Jump Room program, and his participation has been affirmed by 3 fellow participants, myself, William Stillings, and Bernard Mendez. He was then using the name Barry Soetoro, and like my father Raymond and William Stillings' father Tom Stillings, his mother or adoptive mother, whatever the truth of that is, Stanley and Dunham frequently audited our training courses at College of the Siskiyous in summer of 1980. During that summer, I briefly roomed with President Obama. He was a Muslim belonging to a specialized sect of Islam, the Subud sect of Islam from Indonesia. But I did find him praying to Mecca at about 4 o'clock one night when I came back to our dorm room that we shared. I sometimes ran into Barry, as we called him, in Los Angeles during those years. I sometimes would encounter him at the jump room facility at 999 North Sepulveda, which was a Hughes aircraft facility in El Segundo, California. And I was on several jumps with him, including about 5 exploratory jumps in a team of 3, with Bernard Mendez serving as our senior officer. So the president has not publicly affirmed his involvement. He is now commander-in-chief of the U.S. military, so he's put in a pretty difficult spot to affirm his involvement in a defense project that remains secret. But I think I'm at liberty to state that through an intermediary to Bernard Mendez, he stated that he remembered his involvement in the Mars jump room program. He remembered me vividly as one of his friends and colleagues on the project, but everything seemed vague and dreamlike. But notwithstanding that fact, that when he left the presidency, he would affirm his involvement in the Mars jump room program.
All right, Lawrence, you're on the air with Andy. Where are you calling from, please?
Hello?
Hello. Yes, where are you?
Hello?
Yes, where you're on the air. Where are you?
I live in London.
London. Okay, you're on the air.
Yeah, very interesting program. Absolutely fascinating. But
Yes.
I was looking at the second image, and I've been technical illustrator for years in my life, so I'm quite used to looking at perspectives. And the image of Andrew in the second image just seems to me as if it's too big in relation to the rest of the images.
It is. I was undergoing a time-space effect where the softer, more pliable parts of my body were evanescing. The effect was wearing off, and I was going back to 1972. The denser bodily structures, such as my teeth and skull, are holding back. Art mentioned earlier that there seems to be water present. That was probably the water in my head. So I was actually being obliterated at that location, dematerialized, if you will, as I was disappearing from view as the plasma confinement effect was wearing off. So it is, I noted the discrepancy that you've identified. Essentially, my head looks bigger than it should, but I would add that my head was dematerializing.
Right, I
On the picture.
see.
And it
Great to
can't
have
be
you
the
back,
classic.
by the way.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. That's all he's got.
Well, I was going to add, Art, that it can't be the classic Civil War era photograph of defect where somebody moved when the negative was being exposed, because that created a moving blur. What we see there is a standing fade, and there was no technology to produce that in 1863.
All right. Not a lot of time here. Bellevue, Washington. You're on the air with Andy. Bellevue, Washington. Hello.
Hello, my name is Matt. I'm from Bellevue, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for going on air and taking my call. And Andy, I've spoke with you a few times on Facebook, but you sort of answered this question vaguely in the past, but I kind of wanted to get a little more clarification. You, of course, in tonight's episode, they're talking about the chronovision and going back and forth in time and such, but you also have the experience with the Mars teleportation.
Okay, sir, we need your question right now, please.
Okay, my question is it possible that when you traveled to Mars, it wasn't on the same timeline as we're living in now?
Okay.
At this point in our investigation, all of the above is possible. We could have been going to the past on Mars, the ancient past, the far future on Mars. We could have been going to something else. Bernard Mendez theorizes that we were going to what we've named a synthetic quantum environment in which a Mars-like environment was set up. And there's support for that because there were holographic effects that intruded into our experiences that indicate that it wasn't strictly a spatial accessing of Mars. there were temporal anomalies, there were holographic anomalies. So we believe that the jump room to Mars may not have been a teleporter. It may have been some form of exoplanetary chronovisor that was propagating a hologram of Mars that was reproducing the actual Mars, but in a synthetic environment. That's our best guess at this point.
All right, hold tight. We're at a break. What could he possibly have known about that?
Alright, again, muted just so we do not get copyright strike from the music bumper. As soon as they come back, we will come back. We're going to finish out his episode today. There's only about another 15 minutes of the interview, so we will stay in bonus time here on part 3 until we finish that. We'll just grind out a little in the meantime.
Work with Art Bell invites you to call now. 1-952. Call Art. That's 1-952-225-5278.
Okay, on the wormhole, Kelly thinks I may have mentioned working just briefly for ITT in The Art of Talk, book I wrote back in '98, so I'm not sure about that. I'll have to check it out. If I did, it was kind of an obscure reference. But Andy certainly blew my mind with this. Andy, you're back on the air again.
Yeah, Art, I think the analogy is to the Lincoln assassination. I mean, the 6 or 7 times I was sent there, a lot of minor details changed, but every night Lincoln did get assassinated. I think the analogy to your life experience is that on at least 2 adjacent timelines, you were at ITT Defense Communications in fall of 1971, but you were working on different secret defense applications. Mm-hmm. And that's the nature of the alternate timelines. We find the same people doing similar things, but sometimes there's a slight difference in what they're doing. But it does put you in the same location, and that's my interpretation. I didn't think when I was holding this quantum bombshell that on this timeline you were a Project Pegasus participant, because I had figured out the way that my own movement between timelines altered the data from the early 70s. I mean, that acclimation trip out to ITT Defense Communications probably took place around October 20th of 71. And but it was on another timeline. And here we find you at that defense contractor involved in secret defense work, but of a different nature. Yes. And I think that's almost a perfect example of the way in which the alternate timelines, at least the adjacent ones, are similar, holographic, semi-overlapping, but slightly dissimilar. In this case, what you were working on.
I'll say this, Andy. I talked about motive for a book and a movie. You sure as hell ought to proceed with it, because you definitely got it down. I mean, it's so believable because of the way you deliver with such confidence. And look, here we go. Biff, on Skype, you're on the air with Andy.
Hello.
Hello.
I got a quick story from the Civil War photo. Actually reminded me of a story I heard from my great-grandfather. He was back in the 1890s, encountered a blacksmith, did a really bad job with a horseshoe. My great-grandfather was not a nice man at all, threatened to kill this blacksmith, and before he could do it, the blacksmith...
Okay, please don't tell me you're trying to pass off a Back to the Future reference here, sir. Alright, back to Art Bell.
And a strange young man, they disappeared on a train. And I'm wondering if Andy knows if that's connected to Project Pegasus at all. I'll take my answer off there.
Thank you.
It certainly could have been, but since, the ultimate historical thrust of my account is that time travel actually emerged and was fully operational by 1970, which is sort of the year that I peg everything on. Everything was fully operational by 70. There's really an unlimited field in the future from which time travelers could be coming back to any date. So my answer would be it could have been a chrononaut from Project Pegasus or a chrononaut from some other future project.
Well, people certainly do disappear, don't they? Hazleton, Pennsylvania, you're on the air.
Hi, I have to turn my radio down here.
Yes, you should do that before you get on the air, actually.
Okay, I didn't want to miss any of the program.
I see. Turn it off, please. All the way off.
I have two quick questions for you.
Right.
I had a serious accident. I'm a musician, and about a year ago I had a serious accident with my hearing that did some permanent damage, causing distortion. If someone could go back in time, could they correct a problem like that or keep it from happening? And the other question is, when you went through this time period, when you went to different times and back, do you remember everything that happened? And did it physically change your body, or the way you felt, or did it do anything physically to you that caused you to feel different?
All right, both good questions. Thank you. First is hearing question, and it's a good one. If you had a medical illness that was the result of some sort of, I don't know, industrial accident or whatever, and you harmed your hearing, could you go back in time and change that?
Well, when you went back in time, you'd be the age that you are at the time that you start the journey in the future. Because the past is immutable, because of the collapse of the wave function in the present, during the past's present, you can participate in a past event, but you can't change what happens because you're in the original event.
Okay.
So at most, you could have gone back and informed yourself to avoid the accident, but it looks like since the past shows that you developed the hearing loss from the accident, that you didn't prevent it.
Right. Okay. All right. Physical changes for you in time travel. Any?
Well, there were medical side effects. The child teleportees in adulthood have developed a disease that mimics diabetes. That was the major part of Jack Pruitt's motivation for meeting with me in June of 2003, to advise me of that malady and to pursue basically caloric restriction and glycemic indexing of my food to avoid rampant weight gain. Thank God and thank Jack, I have avoided.
All right.
Others have not been so lucky. Adults who were teleporting in that era, including my father, developed heart valve defects because their tissues were denser, and the vibrational effects within the wordle tunnel, it was believed, fused their.
So there are
fusing
dangers. There are dangers.
Yeah, my dad lived the last 13 years of his life with an artificial mitral valve, which had to be removed during open heart surgery. And that was undoubtedly from his teleporting in Project Pegasus.
All right. Mark, wherever you are, you're on with my guest, Andy.
Yeah, hi, Art. This is Mark again in Bern, Switzerland, and I have a question for Andy.
Sure.
Andy, if timelines, or if you could have multiple timelines in the past, it sort of says that, I don't know, the past is fluid in some sense. What does this say about causality? Cause and effect. How does this change, what we take for granted, that if A happens, then B follows? Can you say something about that?
Well, the time travel definitely upturns the notions and understandings we have from early infancy about causality. This is actually a very brilliant question. Essentially, when you time travel to the past and intervene in a past event, you are providing what you basically propagate is the effect before the cause. I mean, I was in 1863 appearing in that photograph before I went there. So the effect precedes the cause during retrocausation by going back to the past. The same, just syllogistically, the same applies to the future. So in fact, time travel disrupts and overturns our conventional abiding notions of causality. This is why I've spent, 100,000 words, 1 million words on Facebook explaining the fact that when you go back to the past, you can't change the event that occurred because you were visiting the original event and you were part of it. But if you were traveling from the future, you were creating the cause before the effect before the cause was offered, which you only offer in the future when you go back in time travel and affect the past. It's not something that people can readily grasp because after object permanence in infancy, we then start to understand causality. We know if we cry, then our mother's going to show up at our crib, and that B follows A. and that's the way the universe works. But the problem is that time travel upsets our notions of causality. I think in terms of the other question, I think that you're implicitly acting, which is something about the phenomenology of reality. It really goes back to the Einstein-Heisenberg dilemma. Einstein believed that the world exists because we perceive it, whereas Heisenberg insisted that the world exists and we perceive it. I don't think that tautology has really been resolved, but I kind of lean towards Heisenberg, because I think even if I don't think about some aspect of the world, it has an a priori existence, and that's why I can sometimes perceive what's in the world, like what the Eiffel Tower looks like, or any kind of data point like that.
All right, Mark.
Thank you.
Right, thank you very much for the call, and take care of yourself there in Switzerland. Let's go to, Bloomington, Illinois on the phone.
Yeah, hi Art, my name is George.
Hey, George.
And it's been a pleasure listening to you guys speak about this evening, and I'd like to ask Andrew a question there about his time travels into the future. As far as when you traveled into the future, were you able to make any note of any kind of major medical advancements that might have taken place that have not yet taken place, such as maybe cures for, say, blindness or,
Really a good question. Really a good question. What about it, Andrew?
Implies or infers rather the question about whether ethically we should require the government to visit the future and bring back technologies that would be life advantaging. And I was told they didn't want to do that because they were concerned that the developmental timelines would not occur, and that, for example, a technology would be introduced that there would be no mechanics to repair or spare parts to repair. But your basic question is whether I saw any biological or medical changes in the future, and I did. Most of my time travels to the past. I went to 2013 via Advanced Chronovisor, and then I teleported, maybe about 10 times to 2045 to pick up the summaries of intervening events between the 1970s and 2040s and bring them back to the early 1970s. One thing I noticed at that CIA building where I was retrieving those microfilm summaries of intervening events was that the young people were very tall. So I think there's a kind of an avatar effect that will probably result from improved nutrition, neonatal and postnatal care, and probably genetic engineering. The human species is going to become taller and more lithe physically, because clearly I could tell as, a fifth grader from New Jersey of ordinary stature that the young people I was interacting with were very tall compared to, for example, my college-aged cousins, and were even taller than some of the ordinary statured people at that particular building, which was an intelligence community building somewhere in the American Southwest.
Okay, he was asking about specifically medical advances. That was interesting about getting taller, but for example...
No. See, most of what I learned about the future was shop talk, because I only did those jumps. And when you teleport to a particular location in the future, just like if you were to fly into New York City,
right,
the mere fact that you're there doesn't make you omniscient about the past, present, and future of that locale. You only get that thin slice of the quantum hologram that is your immediate experience at that time place, that location. So most of what I learned about what the future held relative to the early 1970s was what I overheard the adults in the project talking about at lunch, for example.
All right.
9/11, so forth.
All right, short on time. Jack W. on Skype. You're on the air.
Hey, Art. Mr. Basiago, just an easy question for you. You said earlier that you're able to spend summers traveling abroad, kind of doing your own research. Where was someplace that you enjoyed going and that you would go back to if you had a chance?
Huh. No, I think that you're confused about what we were talking about. What I was describing was that in the summer of 71 and 73 and then 72, because we accessed the summer of 73 from fall of 71, we teleported to New Mexico, spent those entire summers there, and then when we teleported back to New Jersey, they set the teleportation device in New Mexico to deliver us back about an hour after we had originally left at the beginning of that summer. So I then experienced second summers of 71,
Right.
second summers of 72, in which different life events occurred.
Right. Okay, good. Asheville, North Carolina. You're on with Andy Basiago. Hi. Asheville, North Carolina, going once. Going twice. Gone.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you are there. Sorry, I missed you, buddy. You were just a little late. Trenton, New Jersey, you're on the air with my guest.
Yes, I was hoping your guest could describe in detail the clothes that you were wearing, possibly when he met you.
The clothes I was wearing.
Clothes Art was wearing? Standard sort of technical clothes, right? You know, with a basic pair of pants and, you know, a tailored shirt with a pen holder, just the sort of the techie look of 1971. It did look like Art, and the individual did possess a kind of an Auguste personality like Art possesses, but he also kind of backed off and flirted pretty assertively with our very beautiful facilitator, Elaine Gallagher.
It's me.
And she actually softened up, and I'm convinced that she didn't bring him up on report. But then again, that's not this Art Bell, that's the Art Bell on that timeline. But it was just conventional engineering-like clothing of that era.
Okay, well, the Art Bell on this timeline remembers being like that for sure. On Skype, you're on the air. Hello.
Hello, Art. Hello, Andy.
Hi.
By the way, that caller who was talking about the blacksmith was making a joke about a Back to the Future movie, the final Back to the Future movie, where he went and he talked about having a train. He was yanking your chain.
Yeah, well, I can't resist.
I haven't seen it, so I can't comment.
Exactly. I've often wondered about the time travel thing. Shouldn't, like, those of us who aren't going anywhere be bumping into time travelers here and there? Like, in other words, would there be a cumulative effect of all these, you know, more and more people doing this, and like more and more people bumping into them, such that it would kind of, you know, become more known?
It's a good question. I don't know how we would know we're bumping into them, but Andrew?
That postulate, which comes up often, I think it was offered perhaps by Stephen Hawking even to debunk time travel, depends on the Blythe assertion, the Blythe corollary that time travel will become a widespread function in the future. I oppose that as a matter of law, policy, and philosophy, and I would actually enforce that ban as president, because clearly mass, as I say often on Facebook, mass time travel by mass people on mass timelines would produce mass chaos. So in fact, the reality of the externalities of having some people time traveling, for example, for the U.S. government, is that we would want it to remain a resource, an opportunity that would be limited in access by the public, or we would undermine the fundamentals of society. So the evidence really supports the notion that time travel per se will remain sequestered tightly within government circles. But what I'm advocating is the declassification and deployment of Tesla teleportation for real-time transport, which wouldn't involve an offset in time, but merely a more efficient way of getting from point A to point B.
All right, Andrew, listen, we're out of time. Anything you want to promote, Facebook pages, web pages, your book, your movie someday, what would you like to promote?
I'd just like to say it was a pleasure to finally appear with you and also to drop my quantum bombshell. I just really enjoyed the broadcast. I think it was a classic, and I just want to say that I'm so grateful to finally be on with you and to get so far into the material. I really don't have anything to promote except maybe my Facebook group, Project Pegasus, where a lot of my discourse on time travel goes on. But I will fight for the declassification of teleportation if the American people in their wisdom elect me their president.
All right, well, good luck with that, and to Donald and Hillary and all the obstacles in front of you. Thank you very much for being here, Andrew, and looking forward to, I'm sure, another program one day. Take care, my friend.
Take care, Art.
Good night. That's the way to round out a week, huh? From the high desert to all the time zones in the world. Yikes. Good night.
that was Midnight in the Desert with Andrew Basiago, August 14th, 2015. We will have a completely new interview up on offer tomorrow night at this time for part 3, as we have a few pets bouncing around from our eggs. Really love to get 3 more real quick if we can. Do I have something that's just got portal charges real quick? Energy, 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 energy. That's a lot of energy. Energy. And I don't really want to use that one up because that's like the last of those I can have until we can get to 70. And trigger adventure number 6. So, I think we've got 10 that we can claim, right? In the holiday every day. Yep, so we get 25 spears. And with that, from the Great American Southwest, or anywhere you may be listening, watching, or anything else around the world, it's been a new day to release the Kraken. Make sure again you do like, share, and subscribe. Get Boxy to notice us over at Nexters and YouTube to notice us over in Google Land. We're over 17% of the way, at least, to Boxy's goal. So help us get there. And again, until next time, release the Kraken and enjoy the new world. Have a great night.